Hey, what's up, everyone? Everybody good? Good. Today we're learning Masechta Shabbis, Daf Ayin Daled, over here at Babylon Talmud. Let's do an overview before we begin. Great daf. We talk about the sugya of borer. Although, at the beginning, right, we get into like borer and so selecting and winnowing and sifting. And then we get into like the big sugya of borer, which is cool, like about a bunch of different opinions on what selecting is. We will get into that. We'll get into the great melacha of grinding. Okay. Baking, shearing. What else did we get into? At the end there is, what was it? Tying, untying, sewing, all this stuff. Yeah, cool stuff. Let's do this. Ein Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Azora, Aborer, Batochen, V'Amrake. So in our Mishnah, we listed all 39 melachos yesterday. Now, 4 of those melachos were winnowing, selecting, grinding, and sifting. So the Gemara wants to know, Hainu Zora, Hainu Borer, Hainu Murakid. New, essentially, winnowing, selecting, and sifting are all the same thing, right? The idea is you are separating the good stuff from the bad stuff. Winnowing is you take stuff and chuck it in the air so that the bad stuff flies away and the good stuff, lands on the floor. Selecting is you basically, imagine you have a mixture of stuff and part of it is good and part of it is bad. So you just kind of pick out the bad stuff or pick out the good stuff, right? But you're selecting good from bad. And sifting also is, you take a sifter and you put a bunch of stuff through, and anything that doesn't belong will kind of stay on top, and all the flour or whatever you want will go through. No, so it's all basically the same idea. So how come we have 3 melachos? Why don't you just list one if it's all basically the same melacha? So, what does the Gemara answer? Who knows? Who could tell me? What does the Gemara answer? Okay. Abaye v'Rava d'Amar Tarvayu. So Abaye and Rava both agree and say, Kol milsa d'Avid b'Mishkan, afal gav de'ika d'Damila chashivla. So Abaye and Rava say that any melacha that happened while they were building the Mishkan, we list in that Mishnah. So even though, yes, you're right, winnowing and selecting and sifting are really quite similar and have the same goal and would be in the same family of melacha. Mistama, I guess. Yeah. And so what would you do about, like, for example, Rabbi Yochanan, of course, said that there are 39 melachos, to say that if you do all of them behela machas, you'd be chayiv 39 times, but aren't these all the same av melacha? In which case, shouldn't you only be chayiv once for these 3? I don't know the answer. But in any event, even though they're similar, and theoretically we can just write one of them, we wrote all 3 of them, since all 3 of these melachas were done as part of, I believe that would be part of making the dyes in the Mishkan. So therefore we list all 3. Now, the Gemara asks the kasha for the chashev nami kotesh. Why don't you also list kotesh, which is they would take when they were making the dyes, they would have to take the seed and smash it to separate the content from the klipa, from the shell. So why is that not listed in the Mishnah? Right? If we're saying that every single thing that was done when building the Mishkan is listed in our Mishnah, what happened to Kotesh? Right? So Rashi says, Kotesh is, Rashi says in the second Rashi on the page, V'lechashev nami kotesh, so chitin b'machteshes. If you take, let's say, a wheat kernel, and you put it in a mortar, and you give it a good crush, so last year klipasan, to remove the shell, the havai b'mikdash b'samimanin, that they were in the Beis Hamikdash, or in the Mishkan, for the dyes, so why don't we list that as well? So, Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, well, shekein ani ochel pito below k'tisha. Okay. So Abaye says because a poor person eats his bread without necessarily being kotesh the chitin, right? He would eat sort of a coarser bread. He wouldn't spend the time to make it a finer flour. So now, interestingly, what does baking bread have to do with the building of the Mishkan? And the Gemara is actually going to ask that on the second Amud of our daf today, because after all, the Mishnah mentions Ofeh. But what baking was there when they were building the Mishkan? There was bishul, there was cooking. You would have to cook the dyes. But why does it say Ofeh? So ultimately, we're going to say that, well, actually, interestingly enough, all of these malachos related to the dyes are also related to making bread. And therefore, we're listing these things in the context of actually making bread. So even though when they were building the Mishkan, they weren't baking bread, they were, making dyes for the wools and stuff. But nonetheless, because they overlap with the baking bread, so we list them in the context of the Sidur de Pas, right? The steps in the process of baking bread. And therefore, right, that's why it mentions Ofeh as opposed to Bishul. And also now, in terms of how come it doesn't say Kotesh, the answer is because Kotesh is not necessarily part of the Sidur de Pas. So even though it was in the Mishkan, since we are kind of listing these things in the context of baking bread, so not everybody necessarily will crush the wheat to separate the sort of the shell, and poor people would leave the shell, therefore we didn't include it. Okay. Rava Amar Hamani Rebihi. So Rava gives his explanation, which is, well, our Mishnah, which is listing these 39 melachos, is in accordance with Rebbe's opinion, who says, the Amar Avos melachos arbaim chaser achas. The Rebbe says that the Avos melachos are 39. Now, v'chashiv kotesh hav yalei arbaim. And therefore, for technical reasons, if we were to include kotesh, well, we would no longer have 39 melachos, we'd have 40 melachos. And we don't want 40 melachos, so it's musical chairs. One of them has to be out, and that is kotesh. Sorry, kotesh. V'leipuk chada mehanach v'la'ayil kotesh. The Gemara says, come on, it's not just musical chairs, right? How about this? We have winnowing, selecting, and sifting. Let's just get rid of one of those three, and then we can include kotesh. So, Ela machvartik Abaye. Rather, it makes more sense, like Abaye said, that the reason why kotesh is not there is because poor people don't do kotesh when they're making bread, and therefore we exclude it. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Harulufan of mine ochlin. Okay, so what if you have a bunch of different foods in front of you? And I'm thinking about this as like a trail mix, right? You have your peanuts, your cashews, your almonds, your M&Ms, and your raisins. Okay? Now say you don't like the M&Ms. Just kidding. Everyone likes the M&Ms. Say you don't like the raisins. Okay? So what do? It's Shabbos, you got your trail mix, and you don't want the raisins. You want everything else. So, Tanar Banan, are you the fun of Mine Ochlin? So you had a bunch of food in front of you, a trail mix. Por v'ochel. So you can separate this mixture. It doesn't say how to separate it. Maybe you can just take the raisins and throw them in the garbage. Or maybe what you could do is you can just kind of like take the stuff that you want and then leave the raisins at the end and you just won't eat them. Doesn't seem to make any differentiation here. So, borer v'ochel, so you can select and eat. Uvar maniach, you can select and just leave them aside. And then interestingly, the Brisa says, v'lo yivrav v'be'er chayav chatas. And don't select anything, and if you do, you're going to be chayav chatas. So we have to understand what this means. What does it mean that you can select? What does it mean that you can select and leave them? What does it mean don't select, and if you do, you'll be chayav chatas? So what's going on over here? And now we're going to have, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different opinions about how to explain this Brisa. Okay. Maika Amar, so what's pshat in the Brisa? Amar Ula, Hachi Kamar. So Ula said, this is what the Brisa is saying. Borer v'ochel levo bayom. So you can select as long as it's for today, So if you're going to eat your trail mix today, as long as you can eat your trail mix today, you can separate out the raisins, and later on you'll enjoy the, the trail mix. Bor maniach levo bayom, and also again, so you can separate it and then leave it as long as it's for today. Ulemachar lo yivra, but don't separate for tomorrow. Let's say tomorrow you're having a big party and you want to have a lot of trail mix, but you also don't want to have a lot of raisins. So you figured, why don't you just get rid of the raisins on Shabbos and then you'll have it for tomorrow. No, don't do that. V'imbe'er chayav chatas. And if you do, select it for tomorrow. You'll be chayav a korban chatas. Maske floor of Chisda. So if Chisda asks a kasha against Ula, v'chi muter lahafos lebo bayom, v'chi muter levashel lebo bayom. Rav Chisda says, wait a second, Ula, come on. Are you just like allowed to do malacha on Shabbos as long as you're intending for today? Well, you can bake as long as you're going to eat the bread today. You can cook as long as you're going to eat the food today. No way, no how. So therefore, you also can't select, even though it's just for today. Elam Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda gives us his own suggestion, which is, Borer ve'ochel pachos mikashir. Borer maniach pachos mikashir. Okay, you can select and eat as long as it's less than a shear. A shear being, of course, a grogeres, a dried fig, which is the shear for all melachas on Shabbos relating to food. So as long as you're selecting less than a dried fig's worth, well then it would be okay. And you can eat it now, you can eat it later, right? Borer maniach pachos mikashir, uchshir lo yivror. But once already you're selecting more than the amount of a dried fig, forget it. And if you do select more than the amount of a dried fig, you will be liable to bring a chatas offering. Maske floor of Yosef. Now Rav Yosef asked a kasha on Rav Chisda. V'chi muter lahafos pachos mikashir. I don't understand. Are you allowed to do malacha as long as it's less than a shear? Kilu milechatchila, are you allowed to bake just like a tiny bit? It's less than a shear? No, you can't. And therefore you also can't select even though it's less than a shear. Ela Amar Rav Yosef. Borer ve'ochel biyad. Okay, so Rav Yosef explains that what you can do is when you can select as long as it's with your hand. So if you're taking your hand and you are, taking the raisins and putting them aside, well then that would be fine. Borer maniach biyad. And you can also select and put them aside for later as long as you're using your hand. Bekanon uvitamchoy lo yivror. Now, if you use some kind of like a funnel or some kind of a plate, and you're going to use these things to help you select and separate the good from the bad, so then it's pater aval aser, right? Now, this isn't the normal way that you normally select. Normally, selecting is with like some kind of a sieve or a sifter. But this is some kind of more like kilachar yad kind of way, and therefore it's going to be pater aval aser. And Rav Yosef says that, but if you use a sieve or a sifter. So I looked this up on Google, and so apparently a sieve is kind of like something that separates like liquids from solids. So almost like, one of those kind of meshy kind of thing, almost like a strainer, I guess, for like a pasta strainer, let's say, right? So that'd be more like a sieve, where you just kind of pour it through the pasta strainer, and the water goes out the bottom, and the pasta stays in the thing, assuming that is your method for separating the pasta from the water. Now, a sifter would be kind of like a flour sifter, where you just kind of put all the flour in there, and you want to get rid of any clumps or anything else that might be in there. That is a sieve and a sifter. And if you use those on Shabbos, I don't know exactly how you would put your trail mix through a sifter, but or a sieve for that matter. But maybe not everybody's eating trail mix. The truth is, I don't eat trail mix that often. But I'll tell you something. For anybody who wasn't with me on Purim, I made a trail mix from Mishloach Manos. I think it was a pretty good trail mix, Lamaisa. Like, I went to the shuk that morning. I got all fresh ingredients, except for the M&Ms. Those are probably old, but somehow those things don't really get stale. And that's what I gave for Mishloach Manos. I figured there was different kinds of foods, different brachas. Who doesn't like trail mix, especially when you're drunk? Alright. So, back to the Gemara. Where was I again? Right, Rav Yosef. You can do, whoa, there's a crow. Okay, you can select, okay, so Rav Yosef says that you can do borer with your hand, but you don't do borer with, what's it called? A tamchoy, a funnel or a plate. That would be pater aval aser. And if you use a sieve or a sifter, you would be chayv chatas. Weiter. Maske for Rav Nuna. Now Rav Hamnuna asked the kasha on Rav Yosef. Midi kanun v'tamchui katane. 1 second. That brisa that says that you're allowed to do borer for borer v'ochel, borer maniach, don't do it b'yuchai v'chatas. That brisa doesn't say anything about sieves and sifters and funnels and plates. Ela amar Rav Hamnuna borer v'ochel, ochel mitoch hapsoles. Borer umeniach, ochel mitoch hapsoles. Psoles mitoch ochel lo yivrav and ber chayav chatas. So Rav Hamnuna makes it an ochel mitoch psoles versus psoles mitoch ochel thing. Okay, Rav Hamnuna says, so it depends. If you are separating the stuff that you like from the stuff that you don't like, that's alright. But if you're separating the stuff that you don't like from the stuff that you like, that would not be okay. So back to our trail mix example. If you're taking out all the raisins and throwing them in the garbage, that is not okay. That's psoles mitoch ochel, and if you do that, you'd be chayav chatas. However, if you are separating the stuff that you like, i.e. you have the trail mix in front of you, and you're just, grabbing a cashew, grabbing a M&M, grabbing a peanut, whatever it might be, you're grabbing the stuff that you like, and then just leaving it back, leaving over the raisins, so beseder, no problem, enjoy. Okay, that's Rav Hamnuna's opinion. Maskefla Abaye. Abaye has the kasha and Rav Hamnuna. Midi ochel mitoch psoles katani. Does that brisa say anything about ochel mitoch psoles? Elam Abaye. Rather says Abaye borer v'ochel la'alter. What it means is that borer v'ochel means you can select from this mixture, I guess, however you want to select. I don't know, it doesn't say anything about ochel, psoles, ochel. Select whatever you want, I guess, and eat immediately. Uvar umeniach la'alter. And you can also select and put aside, again, I guess as long as, you're going to be eating it in the same sitting. But just to kind of select for later on in the day, maybe it's, the morning and you want to separate out this trail mix for shal shudis. So lo yivra, don't do that. And if you did, naisa kivora leotar, it's as if, for all intents and purposes, you selected this mixture, you separated this mixture for storing away long term, the chayav chatas, and you'll be chayav chatas. Amar Rabbanan kami de Rava. The rabbis said in front of Rava, Amru shaper amar Nachmani, and he said to them, Nachmani said very good. Nachmani, of course, being Abaye. I believe it's because he was an orphan and he grew up in the household of Rabba bar Nachmani, which is Rabba, and they called him Nachmani. Zok the Gemara, Hayulafanav Shnei Mine Ochlin. Okay, so if he had in front of him two types of foods. Now, I think this note says that you can also theoretically get rid of shnei, the word shnei, whatever it is. If we have shnei, then we can't really use our trail mix example. We'd have to use maybe, rice and mushrooms, let's say. But if you get rid of the word shnei, then we can keep our trail mix example. Anyways, uverer ve'achal, uverer ve'eniach. And we're saying that, okay, now, so it says, so I don't know if this is a brisa, I don't know what it is, but basically we're saying that if you have a mixture, and you selected and you ate, you selected and you left over, Rav Ashi masni potter. So Rav Ashi says potter, which is interesting, right? Because our brisa that we said, knew what was the brisa that we quoted at the beginning? We said bor v'ochel bor maniach, right? V'lo yivor v'imber chayav chata. So it sounds like either it's kind of black and white, right? Either you can select and eat immediately, and that sounds like it's fine. But then again, there seems to be a case where you'd be chayav chatas, which sounds like, chayav. Whereas Rav Ashi is saying pater aval aser. So that seems to be unique, although we did have one opinion which mentioned pater aval aser, and that was Rav Yosef. He said if you use a funnel or a plate, you would be pater aval aser. So let's see. So we're saying, how you the fun of shnei mine ochlin? He had in front of him two types of ochlin. Uver v'achol, uver v'eniach. And he selected and he ate, he selected and he left over. Rav Ashi masni pater. Rabbi Yirmiyah midifti masni chayav. Rav Ashi masni pater v'atani chayav. 1 second, how could Rav Ashi say pater? Didn't our brisa say chayav? They're going to have to bring a chatas? So lokasha abekanun v'tamchoy abenapa uchavar. Says it depends. If you're using a kanon v'tamchoy, then you're going to be pater aval aser. And if you're using a sieve or a sifter, you're going to be chayav chatas. It sounds like Rav Ashi is basically holding like Rav Yosef, because that's what Rav Yosef said, that if you use a funnel or a plate, you would be pater aval aser. But if you use a sieve or a sifter, it would be chayav. Kasser Rav Dimi, Amar. When Rav Dimi came from Israel to Bavel, he said, Shabbata de Rav Bevai Havoy, I was present when Rav Bevai was on Toranut for Shabbos, right? I guess, I don't know, maybe in the yeshiva or wherever they lived, whatever it was. So maybe, I guess it would be somebody else's turn every Shabbos to take care of all the minyanim, to make sure there's food, make sure everyone has what they need. So it was Rav Bevai's Shabbos, okay. Viklu Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, very cool. And Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were in town for Shabbos. Shada Kamayu Kalkala de Pere. And guess what Rav Bevai did? Came to dessert, and he just took out a whole basket of fruits. It was fruits and leaves, and I guess that, there was like just a whole basket full of stuff that they had picked. And he just chucked the whole basket on the table. He emptied out the basket on the table. He didn't kind of pick out, an apple and put an apple in front of each person. He didn't do that. He just kind of took the entire basket and dumped it out on the table. So, Rav Dimi is saying, V'lo yadayna imishum desavar ochem mitoch psoles aser. I don't know if the reason why he didn't just take out the fruit and put it in front of each individual person, because I don't know if it's because he holds that you're not allowed to do that, because he would not, because he holds that you wouldn't be allowed to take the food and separate it from the bad stuff, separate it from whatever leaves and stuff are in the basket. Or maybe he had no problem with that, meaning if he wanted to, sure, he would have just taken the apples and put it in front of everybody. The thing is, he wanted to show how much bounty they have. He wanted to, right, ayin yafeh, a good eye. He wanted to show how much shefa there was. So he just kind of took this whole big basket, dumped it out on the table. Everybody take, there's plenty, right? Whereas if you would just take an apple and put it in front of each person, so then maybe there isn't so much, right? And then he's got to say, oh, there's more. If anybody wants, there's more. Like this, he could just kind of take the basket, dump it out. You see that there's plenty, eat whatever you want. So, Rav Dim is saying he wasn't sure if Rav Bevai held that Ocha Mitoch Psoles is Aser in terms of Borer, or if we just kind of wanted to show how magnanimous, how gracious he was as a host and how much shefa there was. But but there's no implication in terms of what he held in terms of Borer. Weiter. Chizkiya Amar, says the holy Chizkiya, HaBorer Turmusim Mitoch Psoles Sheloin Chayev. So what are turmusin? Who remembers? Everybody knows turmusin already. We've seen it a few times, right? Yisrael even one time posted a photo for us in WhatsApp. Turmusin are these legumes that you'd have to cook 7 times, and it was some kind of they would eat it for dessert. I guess it would get sweet. So Chizkiya Amar Habora turmusim mitoch psoles sheloin chayev. So somebody who separates these legumes, these beans, I think they're called lupines, from their psoles is chayev. Interesting. So it sounds like maybe Chizkiya is saying that ochel mitoch psoles is not allowed, right? These beans mistam are ochel, and we're saying that you're not allowed to separate them from the psoles. So the Gemara says no, shiny turmusim. Don't bring an example from these interesting turmusim beans. The shalkile shiva zimne, because you have to cook them 7 times. The ilo, read the next word shalkile. Rashi prefers shalkile. The ilo shalkile masrach v'chipsoles mitoch ochel dami. Okay, and if you don't, so let's say you didn't cook them 7 times. Let's say you just cooked them 3 times. Well, if you only cook them 3 times, then they're not really going to be ready to eat, and they're going to be considered psoles, and that's what we're talking about. If you were to separate these turmusin beans that haven't been cooked enough times, so they're considered psoles, and that's why you can't separate them from the other things that they're with, because it would be ki'ilu psoles mitoch ochel. Okay, friends, let's go weiter. Ve'atochen, says the Gemara. So the Mishnah goes on and says tochen, grinding. Okay. Amra Pape, says a Pape, Hai man de parim silka. Okay, so if somebody were to dice up beets, Chayv mishum tochen would be chayv for grinding. Dicing, cutting something very, very small would be grinding. Amr of Menashe, Hai man de salis silte, Chayv mishum tochen. Somebody who cuts up wood very small so that it would be able to burn well. Someone out on Shabbos, I don't know, but anyways, you would be chayv for tochen. Amr of Ashi, ikapid amashchasa chayv mishum mechatech. Very interesting. Rav Ashi says, and if while he's cutting up this wood, he's going to be makbid on the size that he's cutting of the pieces of wood that he's cutting them into, well then, not only you're chayv for tochen, but also you're going to be chayv for mechatech, which is cutting into specific sizes. Ve'alosh ve'ofet, continues the Mishnah. somebody who kneads and somebody who bakes. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Shavak Tana Didan Bishul Samimanin Dahava B'Mishkan V'Nakad Ofe. Isn't that interesting, says Rav Papa. Our Mishnah mentions Ofe instead of Bishul, right? Because after all, our Mishnah is mentioning the malachos that they did when building the Mishkan. So therefore it would make more sense to say that they did Bishul, that they cooked, that they boiled the dyes so that they can use them for the threads of like the coverings of the Mishkan and stuff. But instead it says baking. So he answers, Tana Didan Sidur de Pas Nakat, that our Mishnah is mentioning the order of the bread. So, and what does Rashi say? Rashi says, about halfway through the thin lines of Rashi, Sidur de Pas Shehischil Bo, that it began with Nakat. It mentioned Ve'ofe b'makom bishul de Samimanin who do bishul de Pas. And baking is in place of cooking, because baking is basically the cooking of bread. And I looked in the article because I was kind of curious about this, and the article quoted the Ran, the opinion of the Ran, who said that because we bake bread much more often than we, well, not me. I don't know if I've ever baked bread. So not me, but like kind of in general, people bake bread more often than they cook dyes. And therefore, since there's like lots of overlap, essentially 100% overlap between preparing dye and preparing bread, so the Mishnah listed it in the context of making bread, and that's why it says ofe as opposed to bishul. And one sort of side effect of that, as we saw earlier on the page, is that kotesh then got knocked off because not everybody does kotesh when baking bread. Let's go weiter. Amar Rav Acha bar Rav Avira, says the holy Rav Acha bar Avira, Haiman deshada sichta la'asuna chayv mishum mavashal. If somebody takes a peg, a moist peg, and throws it in the oven so that it will dry out and become hard, so he's going to be chayv for mavashal because the heat of the oven is going to be cooking the water. Pshita, well, that is obvious. I mean, it's cooking, no? So I may have had to say, well, his intention was just to strengthen the peg, not to cook the water, but kamash malan, demir parafi v'adar kamit, that in order to make this peg harder, it's first going to have to get soft, i.e. it's first going to have to cook out the water, and that is going to be a problem. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, Haman de artach kufra chayv mishum mevashel. If somebody takes pitch and he heats it up so that the pitch becomes like a liquid, so then you are chayv for mevashel. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Mahudetema kevan de hadar v'ikusha emelo kamash malon. I may have thought that since, well, when you stop heating it up, it's going to get hard, so maybe we won't really consider that bishul. So kamash malon, that we do consider it bishul. Weiter. Amarava Haiman de avar chavisa chayv mishum sheva chatos tanur chayv mishum shmona chatos. Interesting. So it says Rava, somebody who makes a, like some kind of barrel, an earthenware barrel, is going to be chayiv 7 times. So it's seven. If you make a barrel, you're going to be chayiv 7 korban chatases. Without going into all the technical details of what these 7 are, at least I'm not planning on it. But basically, in order to make this earthenware thing, right, you're going to have to do all sorts of melachas, right? You're going to have to, let's say, you're going to have to take like earth, and you're going to have to grind it up, and you're going to have to select it and sift it, and like do, just in order to make this one barrel, you're going to have to do all sorts of melachas, 7 melachas to be precise. You can look up in Rashi, he explains what all 7 are. And then if he says if you're making a oven, so then you are going to be chayav 8 korban chatases, because in addition to all the steps they have to do to make the barrel, you're also going to have to take some mud and reinforce the walls so that it will be able to retain the heat. And as Rashi points out, that will be makeh b'patish, and that will be an additional malacha that you're doing, and that will be 8 chatos. Amar Abai, haman do'avid chalsa chayav achas esrei chatos. So Abai says if somebody makes some kind of a container made out of reeds, so you're going to be chayav 11 chatos, also because of all the different steps that you're going to have to go through in order to make this receptacle. And then if you sew the lip of this receptacle, you're going to be chayiv 13 korban chatases, because you're also then going to be sewing and tying. So interesting, I guess like when we keep on saying the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that if you do all of them behelam achas, you'll be chayiv 39 times, and it's like, how can this guy do all 39 melachos? Well, guess what? I mean, you make one of these baskets, one of these receptacles out of reeds, you've just done 13, potentially. So I guess, maybe get like a few kind of like big inclusive ones, and then the next thing you know, you've done all of them. Busy day, I guess. Somebody who shears wool from a sheep and bleaches it. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hatovet Semer Shal Gabi Behema B'Shabbos Chayev Shalosh Chatos. So Rabba Bar Chana says that if somebody were to spin wool while it is still on the sheep and then shear it after it's already been spun, so you'll be chayiv 3 korban chatases, okay? Achas mishum gozes, v'achas mishum menapetz, v'achas mishum tove. One for shearing it, one for combing it, and one for spinning it. Because basically what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find your sheep with nice wool. You're then going to have to comb the wool while it is on the sheep. You are then going to spin the wool while it is on the sheep. And then you're going to remove the spun wool from the sheep. So if you do this, you will be chayiv for all of those 3 activities. Rav Kahana Amar en derech gziza b'chach, vein derech menapetz b'chach, vein derech tivui b'chach. So Rav Kahana says, actually, you are not going to be chayiv any korban chatases, because none of these things are done normally. This is not a normal way to shear. Normally you would shear it first and then spin it and comb it and stuff. This is also not the normal way to comb or to spin a wool while it's still attached to the sheep. Vilo, what do you mean this is not normal? Of course it's normal. Ve'atani, we learn in a brayso, Mishumar ben Nechemiah, shatov ba'izim, v'tavu ba'izim, that when they would wash the hair, the goat hairs that they were going to use in that mishkan, they would do that while it was still connected to the goat, and they would also spin it while it was still connected to the goat somehow. So amal tviyah al gabi behema shma tviyah. So we see that doing these spinning thread while it is still connected to the animal is a normal way of spinning. So Chachma Yisei Shani. Rav Kahana says, no. Don't bring me a proof from the fact that they did very, very fancy, unique stuff when they were building the Mishkan. That was Chachma Yisera. There was extra wisdom involved in those processes, but we can't necessarily apply that to our normal lives. And in our normal day-to-day, if you were to spin threads from wool while still attached to the animal, it would not be considered normal. And if you did that on Shabbos, you would be pater. Let's go weiter. Tanu Rabbanan, the Rabbi said, "Atolish es akonof ve'akotmo ve'amorto chayiv shalosh chatos." Somebody who plucks a feather from a bird and then he clips off the top of the feather, because that's the soft part that he could then put in a pillow. Ve'amorto, and then from the remaining part of the feather, he kind of separates whatever, I don't know if they're called hairs, but whatever the stuff around the sort of spine of the feather is, he gets rid of, he removes that, so he could put that in the pillow as well. Chayiv shalosh chatos is going to be chayiv 3 korban chatases. V'amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish tolesh chayiv mishum gozes. When he plucks the feather from the bird, he's going to be chayiv for shearing. Kotem chayiv mishum mechatech. When he clips the top off of the feather, he's going to be chayiv for cutting down to size. Memarit chayiv mishum memachik. And then when he removes the hairs from the spine of the feather, so then, from the remaining part of the spine, so then he's going to be chayiv for smoothing. Hakosher ve'amatir. The Mishnah says that one is not allowed to tie and untie on Shabbos. Kshir b'mishkan echa havoy. Where did they tie stuff in the Mishkan? Amarava shekain kosherin b'yisdos oholim. So Rava says, well, basically, right, so we discussed earlier in the Masechta, I can't remember where exactly, I'll be honest. Oh, is this it? Nope, I don't know. I don't know where it is. What do you want me to tell you? But, is this it? I don't know. And I'm done. So, anyways, we learned once earlier that, there were a few coverings for the Mishkan, right? There was the coverings of the threads, then the 6 kinds of threads, and then there was a covering of like the goat hairs, and then there was the covering of the Ors Elim Adam, Ors Tachashim. Anyways, they would tie these coverings of the Mishkan to the ground, secure them to the ground. So there would be pegs in the ground, and then they would use ropes and tie these coverings to the pegs. So Rava says that is where there was tying in the Mishkan. But Amalei Abai says to him, Ahu kosher amanas lahatiru. But 1 second, that is tying with the intention of untying, because after all, the Mishkan was a temporary structure. When they would be on the move, they would take it down. So Ela Amar Abaye, rather says Abaye, Shekin Orge Yurios, Shenifska Loyan Nima, Koshim Osa. Rather, where was there real tying in the Mishkan, in building the Mishkan? It was that when they would be weaving these panels for the coverings of the Mishkan, these curtains, so if you would have a thread that broke, so you'd have to basically connect a new thread to it and tie it. That is where they would do it. Amar late Rava. So Rava says Tabai Taratz the kosher. Very good. So that's correct. That is where there would be a good example of tying and building of the Mishkan. Matir Ma'ikele Meimar. Where is there untying? V'chitema. And if you're going to say the imisramile tre kitre badre adade sharichad v'katerchad, and if you're going to say, well, where they would untie is that, let's say they were weaving these urios, and then at some point the thread broke, and they had to tie a new thread, so they tie a knot, and then they keep on spinning, and then what happens is when they get to the next row of threads, so then the thread breaks in the same exact spot, and now you have 2 knots right next to each other. So if you're going to say, so they would untie one of, and then when you have 2 knots next to each other, so it's going to not look nice, it's going to bulge out. So they would just untie one of them and then leave the other one. But hashta lifnei melech basar v'damin osin kain lifnei melech machem lachem hakadosh baruch hu osin. But 1 second, if you were just like building, if you were weaving some kind of curtain for a king of flesh and blood, and there were 2 knots, you wouldn't just untie 1 knot and then just like leave a big hole in there. So certainly they wouldn't do that for Hashem either. What they would do, Rashi explains, is instead of, so they can't leave both knots there because it wouldn't look nice. But you also can't just like untie one of the knots because then you'll have a hole. So what they would do is they would kind of basically cut the thread, one of the threads, they would cut it above and below where the tear is, and then they would just kind of replace that so that you would have, I guess, knots in different areas. Spread out the knots. Anyways, but over there you weren't untying necessarily, you were kind of just like snapping the threads. So where do you have untying? The people who would try to catch these chilazon snail things, that they would use their blood to make the dyes, the tcheles. So when they were trying to catch these chilazon snails, so they would have to tie nets. And when tying nets, so you're tying, and that's a kesher shel kayama, it's a knot that you're never planning on untying, and sometimes you would have to untie it though nonetheless in order to like fix it or whatever. V'atofer shtei tfiris, somebody who stitches 2 stitches, v'hatlo kayama, 2 stitches are just going to come out. So Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana, Rabbi Yochanan v'Usha Kashran, so it says Rabbi Bar Bachana and Rabbi Yochanan that, it's talking about where he then tied them, tied the 2 ends together so that they won't come out. And in that case, then you'll be chayiv twice, one for kosher and one for tefira. But, okay, so I guess that's what the case is. That is daf Ayin Dalid of Masechta Shabbos. Cool daf, right? Right. So let us do a recap. So the page started off with asking the question of, well, how come we're listing Zoreh, Borer, and Meraked separately, winnowing, selecting, and sifting? Aren't they really all the same thing? So Abaye and Rava initially said, well, we just list everything that they did when they were building the Mishkan. And if there are repeats, there are repeats. But if they did it when building the Mishkan, we list it. And then we said, what about Kotesh? Kotesh, they did when they were building the Mishkan, yet we don't list it. So Abaye says, well, because Kotesh is in the context of these things that were done in terms of making bread, and not everybody does Kotesh when making bread, since poor people don't do Kotesh. So we left it out. Rava says, well, if you would include Kotesh, well then there would be 40, and we know that there's only supposed to be 39. But we say, but come on, that's not a good proof, because just include Kotesh and get rid of like Borer or something, like, because it's extra. So rather Abaye's opinion is the way to go there, that since poor people don't do Kotesh. Then we got into all these different opinions about borer, right? Because apparently there's one way that you can be borer that would be permitted, and another way that you'll be borer and you'll have to bring korban chatas. So Ula said, so if it's for today, then it's okay. If it's for tomorrow, you have to bring korban chatas. To which Rav Chisda said, what are you talking about? You can't just do malacha on Shabbos even if it's for today. So he says that if it's less than a shear, then if it's less than a grogeris, a dried fig, then it's mutter. If it's more than a grogeris, it's not allowed. To which Rav Yosef says, you can't just do malacha lechatchila even if it's less than a shear. So he says, if you select with your hand, then it's mutter. If you select with a funnel or a plate, it's pater aval aser. If you select with a sieve or a sifter, then it's going to be chayav, you're going to be chayav achatas. Rav Amnuna said, well, who said anything about funnels and plates? So rather he says, if it's food from the stuff that you don't want, if it's the ochel from the psoles, that's okay. But if it's psoles from the ochel, that would not be okay. To which Abaye says, who said anything about ochel and psoles? And he says, rather, if you're gonna be borer and eat immediately, then that is acceptable. But even if it's for later, then it wouldn't be allowed. You'd be chayav achatas. Now, when it comes to grinding, so Rav Papa says that if you dice beets, that would be considered grinding. So, if you cut things up very small, that's also considered grinding. Rav Menashe says that if you chip wood into little pieces, that could also be considered grinding. And then Rav Ashi pointed out that if you are makpid on the size of, if you are particular about the size of these chips that you're cutting them into, so then that would be mechatech. Okay? When it comes to baking, so Papa points out that all these things from Zoreya and Kotzer and Zoreh and all these things, they're all in the context of the Sidura de Pas of the process of making bread, which is why we say Ofe as opposed to Bishul, which was for the dyes in the Mishkan. When it comes to shearing, so Abba Bachana said that if you were to spin threads while it's still connected to the animal, you'd be chayav for 3 things: for combing, for spinning, and for shearing. To which Rav Kana says, but that's not a normal way to do things. To which Rabbi Bachana responds, what do you mean it's not normal? They did it when they were building the Mishkan. So he says, yeah, but you can't bring a proof from that because that was Chachma Yisera. We then got into tying things and untying things. We said, how did they tie things in the Mishkan? Rava initially wanted to say, well, they would tie the coverings to the pegs, to which Abai says, but that was not that they were ultimately going to untie. So Abai rather suggests that when they were weaving the coverings for the Mishkan, if a thread broke, they would have to tie it together. And matir is, but then what would be matir, right? So they ultimately provided a solution. I think it was Rava's solution that kosher and matir is actually found in the context of the people who would search for the chilazon snails. They would have to tie and untie their nets. And finally, we said, sewing 2 stitches, won't those 2 stitches come out? We say, well, you tied the ends together. Okay, that was Daf Ayin Daled. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope you will enjoy your day. Peace.